Heavenly Father, we thank you, Father, for the gathering tonight, for those here that come to study God's Word. I pray, Father, you give us understanding, and Holy Spirit will teach each one of us here and pour out your Word. Your Word will be clear to them. And when you see it, and those you talk to about God will see that you see it too. I pray, Father, you will guide us and touch our hearts tonight. Give us understanding. In Jesus' name.
Lord, we're going to go into the sanctuary, the tabernacle, and we all know that it's supposed to represent you. Help us to see your loving kindness, your wooing through this example. Help it to draw us even closer into a better relationship with you, and more than anything, help us to reflect that love that you've given to us, to others.
Our Father in heaven, we're thankful to be here tonight to open your word and to learn about you. And I thank you for everyone that's here. Pray that you would bless us here with your Spirit, that we might understand. And we do thank you for Jesus and for his life here on earth and all the things that he has shown us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Anybody have any thoughts or questions before we dive into the new one tonight? Tonight's won't be as long, so we have time to sort of work on last night's and tonight's at the same time. Let me at least do this, if you don't have anything directly, and I will say, yeah, please, if you have something that all along this way you've been kind of wondering, you want to ask, you want to throw something out there that we should at least consider a challenge, please don't be afraid to do so. But and maybe the best time would be at the end rather than at the beginning. So let me just review this real quick. We started off with the premise that Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Right? We know that's in John. He said that in that discussion, and he said it a couple of times. That's the place where Philip said, well, Lord, show us the Father. And then Jesus said, Philip, have I been with you so long and you still don't understand? Right, because that's at the end of the 3 years, just a few nights or a few days before the crucifixion. So if we start with the premise of, if you want to know what God is like, don't ask your neighbor, don't ask the post office, don't ask the theology books on the shelves, go and look at Jesus. And everything that Jesus was like, everything that he did and he said, the way he treated people, that shows us what God is really like, as opposed to all the theories out there, right? And so the whole life of Christ was so crucial because in that life, which wasn't just here for a few days and let me die for you so we can get it over with, it was his whole life, from being born, living all the way through, at 12 years old, understanding what his job, his task was, talking with Pharisees about scriptures that he could see they didn't even understand the meaning of, and yet not jumping all over their cases and criticizing them, but rather humbly staying in the carpenter shop until he was 30. Can you imagine knowing what he knew, watching people all around you hurting and dying and deceived, and yet it wasn't time to make an issue of it yet, and so he just waited for his Father to say go. That's submission, obedience, that's humility. Also, that meant he understood the most loving way to help the people would be do it exactly the way his Father said so. So in this whole picture, this whole thing, we can go analyze all the pieces and parts of it, but what it's about is to really understand what God's really like as opposed to what we thought. So if you just start from there, and then of course we back up when we go over the stuff about, well, his love, his forgiveness, healing, and then of course, wait a minute, what about his wrath? Is it possible maybe we've misunderstood that? And really study Jesus and say, whatever God is like in his wrath, Jesus had to show us what it was. He had to show us what the results of it would be, as well as what it looks like from God's point of view. Instead of using something we imagine, let's again use Jesus. And then, of course, going into justice and mercy, just real briefly, to look at how so often we, in a darkened sort of situation, see justice and mercy one way, and yet God in His scriptures and in His work through Jesus showed that justice and mercy actually are not different. One says we must do what is right and what is fair, that's justice, and one says we must do what is loving, which also happens to be what is right and what is fair. And so there really is no difference between the two. Finally, they come together, as it says in Psalms 85:10, righteousness and peace have kissed each other, or justice and mercy have united to become one. And leading all the way then up to the big question of last night, and that is, are we sure that what we've been thinking about what the purpose of the cross was is correct? Are we sure that what some around us say and think, is it correct? And that bottom line question is, did Jesus have to die up here on this cross in order to make forgiveness or love or redemption legal? Or was it necessary to get God to become loving? Even in the Wikipedia, which I was talking with Julie about a little bit ago, it concludes that everybody from all sides of this discussion does agree on one thing: that it would not be right to say that God needed death in order to become loving. They seem to all agree on that point. So that's a good point to work on. Okay, so we'll at the end maybe come back, because tonight actually is going to be a look at the same question, but from a different perspective. This was all about Cain and Abel and Mount Carmel and all the other options we put up there. This is a fun one, actually, by the way. You keep the copies of the notes on this. We did tithe last night as one example of how you can take all the things that we are either interested in or concerned about or really, really adamant about in our beliefs and our religion, and test it by that little scenario there. Test them all. See if it's coming out once again. Because you see in Scripture over and over again how it's possible to take something that was good in the form that God gave it, and then suddenly we're able to turn it into something really bad, and now it's no good anymore. And so God is not stuck to the symbols, right? Like the serpent on the pole, I think we talked about last night, maybe, did we? Serpent on the pole? And how it was a good thing, they looked and they lived, but 400 years later, they're trying to get some healing again and want to please God, and so they set the same thing up. They had saved it all the time. Set it up, and now they start burning incense to it and praying through it or to it or whatever they thought they were doing. And so the very thing that God gave to be a symbol of good suddenly now became a work of iniquity or of idolatry or something wrong. So God is not stuck to the symbols. But understanding the meaning of the symbols helps us understand what God was really trying to say. So we're going to go in now to what was probably the largest version of a mass of symbols in the Old Testament, to try to understand in the Old Testament what God was saying about this whole sacrificial system and what its purpose was and what it was supposed to accomplish. So we're going to, when you do the sanctuary, we could get really detailed. And there's so many symbols in there. We could spend hours and hours working on pomegranates and bells and how many layers of fabric and colors and layers of metal and gold. But we're not going to do that tonight. We're going to look at the main pieces of furniture just to be able to grasp a simple concept. And we'll leave that detailed work for another time. So here's basically what we have. We have the gate here at the beginning. And then the first thing in here would be the altar of sacrifice, or the golden brazen altar. And then right behind it, there was the bowl of water, laver, thank you. And then to the left, after they'd go through this veil, to the left there would be the candlesticks. And then on this side, there was a table of showbread. Yeah, how many did I put there? 2, 3, 4, 6. And over here it was 12. Okay, table of showbread, and then the altar of incense just before the second veil, or the veil to the most holy place. And And then inside the most holy place, what they call the Ark of the Covenant, I'm going to do a side view over here of that. And wings up here, wings here. Okay, and inside, let's fix that. Inside, oh, by the way, if you're interested, I don't have notes on this one. So if you want to take notes, feel free to do so. I don't have a drawing to hand out after the end of this one. So inside of this now we had the Ten Commandments. What's that? Ten Commandments, bowl of manna, which they collected the very first time that manna fell and put in here inside the ark. And then Aaron's rod, which was, you remember that story, the rod where they were questioning who was really the chosen high priest, and so all the heads of the tribes brought a rod. A walking stick is what that is, not a metal rod, a wood stick, staff, yeah. And put it before the tent of meetings, and God said, whichever one I have chosen, because they'll have to write their name, the name of the tribe on each one. And whichever one that tomorrow is growing branches as they come to life, that's the one. So the next day, Aaron's rod suddenly had almond branches growing out of the dead stick. Right? So that's what we mean by Aaron's rod, if you've not looked at that before. Okay, and those are the main pieces of furniture. I'll give you a chance to catch up with the sketch here real quick. I have, I wonder what I did with it. I bet it's at home. Okay. All right, so starting with the very first one, this is the altar where the lambs were sacrificed, right? And what was this a symbol of? Anyone? What was this sacrifice a symbol of? The cross, or Christ, right? So it's Jesus. And let's go ahead and put a cross right on top of it. Okay, so here we have a laver with water in it. What is the water a symbol of? Living water, okay. Who's that? Jesus. And very specifically, the Spirit of Jesus, or the Holy Spirit. I'm going to use, just for abbreviation up here, no disrespect intended, just HS for Holy Spirit, okay? Holy Spirit, which is actually, Jesus said it was His Spirit. So it would be the same as Jesus. Jesus said that Spirit would say whatever He heard from Jesus. He was also called the Comforter. This activity, just so we know the symbol of the activity, after the priest would help with the sacrifice and blood would be on his hands, he was to wash his hands in that blood before he entered into this compartment. Now what he was entering into this compartment for was to take a little bit of that blood on a hyssop and to sprinkle it on the altar of incense. So that would be why he would wash his hands. His feet were also supposed to be clean, by the way, but again, I won't get too detailed. All right, so Jesus, Holy Spirit. Now, this symbol up here has three parts to it. This is the candlesticks, or the, what's the fancy name for that thing? Menorah? Menorah. There. All right, so we have three parts to it. That's the lamp. We have the oil, and we have the light, or the flame. Okay? So what would the lamp, the brass, or the gold, I guess it was, the gold lamp, what was that representing?
Word of God.
The Word of God. Psalm says, Thy Word is a lamp unto my feet. So it's the Word. Okay? Which is also a record of, I should do this, we'll do a lowercase word for the Scriptures, which is a record of the Word, which is who?
Jesus.
That's right, it's Jesus. Okay? And what's the oil a symbol of?
Holy Spirit.
Any idea where we get that from? A verse or a place that we get that it's the Holy Spirit? the parable talks about oil. In the parable itself, it doesn't tell us what the oil means. But you're right, it's interesting to look at that parable from this same connection about what was missing, and that was oil. But it is the Holy Spirit. One of the best places to get that reference for is in Zechariah. The book of Zechariah talks about the all two olive trees on either side of the candlesticks, which is the menorah, and the tubes that went from the olive trees down, connecting, feeding oil constantly into those candlesticks or lamps. And in Zechariah, it explains that that is the Spirit of God. Okay, so that's going to be one of your. There's a few others, but that's the one of my favorite ones is that one. Okay, so oil then is the Holy Spirit. Okay, and here's something kind of interesting as far as symbols are concerned. If you have a lamp, which in this case is the Scriptures, but you have no oil, what good is your lamp? Any good?
And without oil?
No, you're still in the dark, right? You can't burn the metal. And so the Word, Scripture, the written Word, lamp unto my feet, must be connected in reference to it needs oil in it, or it's still no good. So Jesus said this to the Pharisees. He said, you search the Scriptures because you think in them
You have life.
you have life. But they tell you to come to me, Jesus said, to get life, but you will not come. So he was pointing to the fact that they had spent their lifetime, however old they were, studying, and they still did not know the truth. They couldn't see it because they had no oil, right? So we must submit ourselves to God, allowing His Spirit to enlighten us, or when we read this, we still won't see the capital word, which is Jesus, in it, right? Does that make sense? Interesting for the symbols. Okay, so Holy Spirit, and so what is the light then?
Jesus.
Yeah, Jesus said, I am the light of the world. Oops, sorry. And the secondary application, once again, as I was just building a moment ago, will also then be, ye are the
Life.
but ye can't be unless you have both lamp and oil, right? Or you just end up with darkness like the Pharisees had. So that's kind of fun to put together. Okay, so what about the bread down here? What is this
Bobby?
bread?
Where in Zechariah was that?
You know, I think it's Zechariah 3.
Well, it's in 4 is the vision of the lampstand, but I don't see anywhere where it says Holy
Doesn't
Spirit.
it comment that it's the Spirit of the Lord?
Not by might nor by power, but by my
There you go.
Spirit.
That's it. So it's pointing to what's coming from the trees into the lamp is not might nor power, but Spirit.
You have the Amplified Bible, it says it's the Spirit.
Well, it's okay. Even in the one he just read, it says it, right? Because we got to catch the meaning of what's being discussed there. But yeah, it doesn't just say oil equals spirit.
So that was Zechariah what?
Yeah, what was that? 4,
4 verse 6.
verse 6.
Last
Okay,
part.
4 verse 6. Okay, so what's the bread down here? Who's the bread of life? Jesus. So once again, Jesus appears. A little bit different though now, which we'll explain in a minute, but definitely he was the bread of life. Okay, and I'm going to leave this one, except that we already talked about this the other night. If you remember, there was this box here called the throne, or the foundation of God's throne. That is justice. Justice is the foundation of His throne. It says that in Psalms. And this lid on top, what was it called? Mercy seat. And so we see in symbol form the union of justice and mercy. And again, with that symbol, when they made it, there was to be no discernible seam between the lid and the box, so that the eye, observer, if you did look at it, you would see, wait a minute, you can't even tell where one ends and the other begins. Right? They're married, united, union. Yeah, that's what was built right into the symbol. But the rest of that I'm going to explain at the end. We'll go back to the beginning now and talk about what is the purpose of all of this. This is really relating to the experience of those who need to be redeemed or restored. Because remember when God came to Mount Sinai, before this was built, and He said, I want to speak to my people, and he comes up to the mountain and He speaks. What do? They all run in fear, right? They run away. And so there's a problem. We need to somehow be able to bring them back and bring them into union with the one they are afraid of. For no good reason, by the way. Their fear wasn't based on anything that was real. It was based on misunderstanding. So we're going to put this word out here, Gentile. Because the court of the Gentiles is what was out here later. They had another whole courtyard called the court of the Gentiles. And a Gentile, the definition for a Gentile is somebody that does not know. Okay? For instance, in Old Testament it talks about they're dying for lack of knowledge. They don't know me, says the Lord. Turn to me and know me. Many places like that. So a Gentile is someone that does not know. And in this case, the most important thing to know is the truth about God, which we had on our chart in Justice and Mercy. But they don't know that. And so they have this fear and trepidation or this lack of understanding. But God has invited us to come and know, taste of Him, and know that He is good. In fact, you're working on a whole bunch of verses about knowing Him, right? So if you think of anyone we should throw up here, please bring them up.
I left it at home.
Did you leave it on? Yeah, to know, right? All right, so here's what happens with the sanctuary. The first time a Gentile comes and looks through, let's see, let me use a different color. The first time a Gentile comes and looks through here, or looks at this, the first thing he sees is Jesus on the cross, right? Or the lamb being sacrificed. He sees the sacrifice being made for sin. Now, a Gentile's understanding of that will automatically, from its background, be, okay, we needed this for what purpose?
To make God love us.
Because this guy in here was upset. And so we needed an intercessor to stand between, so that he can protect us from what?
The vengeful God.
Vengeful God. That's automatic in the thinking. You don't even have to teach somebody that. All they'd have to do is have some unveiled presence of God on them, and immediately they're going to have that response. That's what sin in us does. It's all we seem to be able to comprehend and know and understand. But Jesus says, come and trust me. And we look at His face and we say, now see, like imagine the woman who was thrown at Jesus' feet, and they wrote in the sand, He wrote in the sand, they all went away. And imagine her thinking now on this statement. Jesus says, come and follow me. Trust me. Anyone who comes to me, I'll in no wise cast out. And right away she's thinking, well, I don't know about what's in there, but I can trust this guy. Because she could see him. She could listen to him. She could look in his face, and she could see what before was so difficult seemingly to see. So Jesus says, trust me now. I want to start working in you, right? You were a Gentile. You come, just trust me. And He starts to do this activity in our life. What is this activity? To start cleansing our minds and our hearts. Jesus talked to His disciples about, it's actually in His prayer to God in chapter 17, and He talks about His disciples and how they had been washed by the Word, which He was the Word, or the teachings He was teaching, both would count, right? Being washed or cleansed or purified. Because again, even that woman, she's looking at Jesus, and her ideas about God are starting to be affected in a positive way. She's starting to see a God she can trust, already being washed with the Word. But it doesn't just stop there. He wants to cleanse the sinfulness in our hearts, and He invites us to come in through the first veil here and come to this. And this is actually what does the continuation of washing. It's the illumination, our understanding, right? So pretty soon we're starting to understand things about God we didn't understand before. Look at Peter. Peter thought God was coming to kill the Romans and set them all up as rulers of the earth. And they kept trying to figure out, even to the last night before the crucifixion, well, who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom? Me first, right? So they needed some cleansing happening in their mind. But as Jesus came into the world and stood in front of them and lived among them, pretty soon this activity started to happen. Remember, as soon as Jesus was raised from the dead and He comes back to see them, and the disciples' minds start to awaken, you see it on, let's say, the road to Emmaus story with those two disciples, how pretty soon their minds, with the help of Jesus, are going back through all the scriptures they learned as a child. So those are new stories. It's just the same stuff, but now they're seeing something they hadn't seen before. They're starting to learn something that they'd never grasped, even though they had read them their whole lives. Because now, you didn't just have a lamp, or the scriptures, you also had the Spirit awakening the understanding of the mind. And so this light illuminates this whole chamber so you can see what else is in here. And so Jesus says, now that you're starting to see, come, don't just imagine of me, don't just theorize about me, but actually do what? Eat. See, when we look at something, we get some input, we get some ideas, we get some thoughts, we have some theories. But when you actually eat the food item, it goes beyond just some theories, and it actually affects every cell in your body. So the idea is not just to look upon Jesus, but to start letting him in, or take him in. To eat him is what that means, to eat his flesh and drink his blood. Obviously, it isn't about cannibalism, it's about letting the Spirit, the power of the Spirit come in and change us inside. And that's the eating of the bread here. Okay? Then Jesus says, now come here. I want to reestablish between you and who? Heaven, God. A relationship of faith, like we talked about last night at 2 altars. A relationship of faith. Because in the Garden of Eden, that's what was broken, right? They put their trust in themselves, listened to the lies from Satan, took their trust off of God, and now trusted themselves, and it wrecked the whole thing, and now they're running away in fear, hiding in the bushes. Right? So that was the problem. Now Jesus is trying to reestablish that, or reconnect, to fix that problem. He says, come and trust me. We didn't actually do, what is the incense? On the altar of incense. Do you remember the dream that Jacob had? There was a ladder, and what was going up and down? Angels ascending and descending on that ladder. And that ladder represented the connection between earth and heaven, whereby God would communicate to us and to work to restore us, or to be with us, or to connect again what had been broken, to restore the breach, to fix the breach. It talks about it in Isaiah. So the incense is actually Jesus, just like that ladder was Jesus, connecting heaven with earth so that we could comprehend and understand. And what arises on this incense in the Old Testament?
Prayers.
Prayers of the saints, or prayers, right? And again, the idea isn't that, although in our Gentile thinking, we might still be having this idea of, well, it's a good thing Jesus is going to carry those prayers up there and interpret them to the Father so that he'll understand me or accept what I'm saying, because probably the way I'm saying it isn't really correct. Okay? There is that thinking out there. And that's normal for Gentile thinking. We're still a little bit not sure about what's in there, but we do trust Jesus. That's the point of getting thus far. There is a trust in Jesus. And Jesus now says, okay, you're starting to pray to the Father. You remember in John, see if I remember now, 16:46? Is that right? Someone read that one for us?
It's kind of funny talking about the Father being able to understand us, because we don't say it right, but he made us.
And didn't Jesus say he knew what you needed before you asked?
Yeah.
And like a father giving good gifts to his children, the Father in heaven is much more than that. Did I get that right? What's 16?
There is no 46.
Sorry, 46.
26.
16:26. Thank you. 16:26. Is that the one about,
Yeah.
I say unto you about praying to the Father? Someone read that.
At that day ye shall ask in my name, and I say not unto you that I will pray the Father for you.
Okay? So anybody's version say that differently?
In that day you will ask in my name. I'm not saying that I will ask the Father on your behalf. No, the Father himself, this is verse 27.
That's fine.
No, the Father himself loves you because you loved me and I believe that I came from God.
Okay, so here, this is when in the story? Can you tell, just looking by the headings, where in Jesus' life are we?
Just before Gethsemane.
Should be the night that he's going to Gethsemane, right? So he's telling them some of the most important things he's ever said. And there's a long discourse between the supper that they had and then Jesus going off to pray. There's quite a lot said. But this is one of the things that is said. He said, I'm not saying that I'm going to pray to the Father for you. But wait a minute. Don't we need an intercessor to go and talk to the Father for us? I mean, doesn't that seem weird when you first read that? Anybody's version say, how about Amplified? Who's got Amplified? Anybody got Amplified? You got it, Mom?
Yeah.
And what does that say in that verse from Amplified? Both verses, that 26 and 27.
At that time you will ask or pray in my name, and I am not saying that I will ask the Father on your behalf, for it will be unnecessary. For the Father himself tenderly loves you because you have loved me and have believed that I came out from the Father.
So here's the disciples. They have been coming along with this thing all this far, listening to Jesus, learning day by day, still confused though, still fighting over who's first in the kingdom. And Jesus is now making a statement. Do you think they got it when he said it? No. They still hadn't really even paid attention to what he's saying. Later they remembered, right? But now they're standing poised right here, and Jesus says, in that day. What day is he talking about? In that day. Does it help us at all if we back up a few verses? What was it? In that day. Which day?
Isn't this after he's,
Verse 23.
Okay, what does that say?
And in that day ye shall ask me nothing. Verily, verily, I say unto you, whatsoever ye shall ask the Father in my name, he will give it you.
Okay, so he's talking about asking. The Father now is going to do the giving. Wow, right? It's almost like Jesus kind of, where'd he go in the picture? But that one's referring to that day also. Is there anything further back to tell us what day is he talking about? What verse would that one be?
17, some of his disciples said to one another, what does he mean by saying, in a little while you'll see me no more?
Okay, keep
And
going.
after a little while you will see me, because I'm going to the Father. So after Jesus
Goes to the
resurrected,
Father. Okay, that is what it's referring to. It's connecting to the fact that in that day being when he goes to the Father. And then there's a little discussion about, he spoke in parables, but now he's going to speak plainly, and in that day I'm going to say it to you plainly. And when did he speak to us the most plainly about God? On the cross. Yeah, he revealed the fact that even if Satan unleashed everything he had on him, he couldn't get Jesus to stop being loving and kind and forgiving, not for a moment. Right? And if Satan can't get him to stop being forgiving, you think we can? That was one of the plainest things when he said, Father, forgive them for they don't know what they do. But it's still, though, connected to a little bit more. It's both that, revelation about God, and when he goes to his Father. Right? He didn't go to his Father the day he died. He came back up from the grave, and then he went to his Father. And where'd he go?
His right hand.
Right in here. I'm not going to draw him. I'm just going to point. He's in there. Right? So he went to the Father, to the right hand of the Father. Right? And now he does this most amazing part. Because he told us, right, trust him, and now he's going to go to the Father, and it's almost as if he said, come right here and just wait a second, and then he goes up there, and now he says, now, trust me, come in. Do you dare go in there? I mean, can you come before a holy God, sinners as we are, and you're going to be struck down, right? What do you mean, Jesus, come in there? Are you sure about that? Maybe you should come back out here and just remind us that you've got it covered, that you're going to protect us from whatever it is. Sometimes we might have those reactions or those thoughts. But Jesus is saying, trust me, come all the way in. And when you come all the way in, and now you look into the face of Shekinah glory, right? What do you see?
Jesus.
What do you mean Jesus? Jesus is standing there at the right hand. What do you see in the face of the Almighty?
Same thing.
Okay, same love, same graciousness, same kindness. Anything different? But see, before, in our Gentile thinking, we were very nervous about that. We weren't sure about that. We weren't sure how to explain, yeah, it's true, once in a while God does lose his temper. Or things like that. We weren't sure. And so there was this little bit, and like the woman, we would gravitate towards being near Jesus because we can trust him, and we just are glad that he's going to be there whenever we have to meet the Father, to stand between, to have an intercessor, right? And yet, is that even needed? Not according to John 16. But we needed an intercessor to come all the way out here to talk us into coming in here i.e. to find out that the Father loved us just like Jesus did. It was the Father who did the sending. It was the Father who sent the rescue mission. It was the Father who wanted to bring us home, not destroy us. What was destroying us? They're dying for lack of sin. The darkening of our understanding about God. That's what was destroying and killing us. And Jesus came to bring light, to wipe away the darkness, to bring us all the way in here. And now you look into the face of the one who did the sending. And we find out, wow, he's the same. As Jesus said to us out here, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And so the conclusion comes. Now you're standing there, and there's a thought, a question that must come to mind. And that is, wait a minute, if the Father was like that, then why did we need this? Because Gentile thinking is that this was done to appease, to win, to somehow fix some problem with God or His law. His law is the law of self-sacrificing love. Paul calls it the law of liberty. The law of love, right? Love Lord your God and your neighbors yourself. Sums up the whole law. So was it that law that said, hey, we've got to go out here and kill them? Or was it that law that said, hey, we need to go out there and try to rescue them? Go ahead.
Bring them in.
It was the law that demanded rescue attempt be made. It was that law. Now back here, we didn't see that. Back here, the law looked like this, called the earthly shadow of the heavenly. And we saw it as this thing that stood against us, to condemn us, and to point out accurately that we were guilty of sin and we had nothing in us that was righteous. Was that true?
True.
It was right. But we didn't find in it any way of escape of that, any fix for that, any solution for that. And so Jesus came to bring us all the way in, and now you look at this one, the heavenly version of it, and you see something you didn't see before. That the law is actually love. And it was the love of God that sent His Son to do the rescuing.
They had a fix for it. They added more stuff to it.
Yeah, they put a big fence around it and try to make it really, so that we can make sure no Gentiles ever get in there, right?
That's the way I read.
All right, so this law suddenly changes in our understanding. And it becomes not the law that is against us, but the law that is trying to rescue us, i.e. Christ. There's no contradiction between Christ trying to win us back to the Father and the law. They're not in opposition. The law simply says, in that condition you'll die. But in this condition, that's life. That's what the law says. And it also says, out of love, we must do everything we can to rescue. That's what heaven law says. So now, as you're viewing all of that, and this is the one I'm going to toss out now for you. There's no scripture to give you this is absolutely what it says. So I'm going to toss this out as an idea you're going to study and work on, and that's this. To really come and see and know God this way is what it means to eat the hidden manna. Because manna is the bread that came down from heaven, right? But this bread, which was baked by who? In the sanctuary? The priest. Baked by the priest. It was a knowledge. It was a beginning of things. It was there, but it also had been handled by human hands. Priests' hands, yes, but human. And now suddenly you go in and you get one that has not any whit, not any fraction of human making, right? They didn't help make it. This was the bread that came down from heaven, the manna. That is Jesus. And of course, we now see that Jesus is this. For instance, someone will argue over whether, the law, we get rid of the law, we don't get rid of the law. But wait a minute, if you're looking at the law, let's just call the law for a moment the 10 Commandments. And you're looking at that, right? It's really easy, like you said, Frank, to start coming up with ways to sort of props and things to make it so we convince ourselves we're keeping it. And until Jesus comes along and says, oh, you even thought it in your heart, you already committed it. Whoa, now we're in trouble again. But when we see that Jesus, if you take that law and you're studying it, and then all of a sudden, there's the face of Jesus in it. Which is harder to be like? The list of the 10 or Jesus? That law and its level of clarity and its demands upon what is really holiness goes way up there, right? Be like Jesus. As Jesus said, be ye perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. And it's amazing or exciting to know that the Father in heaven who is perfect was perfectly represented by Jesus. So it was also to say, be just like Jesus, right? Which no human can do without the power of the Holy Spirit here, and all the way through. Because this was an invitation about coming in to know the Father, and when you see His face, now trust can be there. The broken relationship is restored. The branch is grafted back in. There's a removal of that which separated us from God, and the power of the sap, the tree, can flow through into the branch and produce life.
So basically going in there, we need the wedding garment.
Good. Because the wedding garment that's talking about in that parable was provided by the king. Right? In the parable, the king. Provided by the king. So he made it, he provided it, he gave it, but it is not a robe to cover up sin. Like many have talked about, well, we have, I'm sinful, and then Jesus sort of just enshrouds, and so when the Father looks, what does he see? We say, well, he sees Jesus. Good thing he doesn't see me. Right? Because if he saw me, he'd have to destroy me. So does that mean that this robe thing is fooling the Father? Once again, that's a crazy idea.
Robe means you're part of the family.
Robed, exactly. You go to the prodigal son, and it was a full reinstatement to sonship, even though he deserved it not. And so that robe is the robe of righteousness. It is not a garment we put on outside. It is actually a heart transformed and brought into unity with the likeness of Christ. Let this mind which is in Christ Jesus be also in you. Same verse there as well. Okay, so but that manna is related, this hidden manna is related to finally understanding the truth about God's government. His law, His justice and mercy, how it was always Him who stood on our side. I think right there in Romans talks about that, right? If God's for us, well then who is against us, Paul says. Because he discovered that God was actually on our side. And then he asked, well, what is it, Jesus? Well, no, certainly not. Jesus is the one that came out here, died the sacrifice to invite us in there. Well, then is it the Holy Spirit? No. So Paul concludes that all three of those are on our side, trying to rescue, trying to help, trying to get us back to that connection with God. This is what it means to be grafted back in. And of course, Paul, he's going to talk about how the true Israelites are the Israelites who are not Israelites of the flesh, meaning the blood, right? Their born identity, but are Israelites in the heart, or servants of Christ, not in outward form, as in through physical circumcision, but circumcision of the heart, right? A change and a transformed heart. So once again, just a quick summary to say, it should not really be surprising to us when we look at this, that there is a Gentile view of this whole process, and then there is the view that God was looking from when He saw the whole thing. And He did the sending, not because we were good, not because we asked, because we weren't. None seek after God. No one knows Him, it says, right? Not one has turned to God. But God, while we were yet sinners, over here, sent His Son to talk us into coming in there. And this is actually what the whole book of Hebrews is about. It actually seems kind of complicated until once you see this concept, go back and read it, and it will get really simple. Because in the whole book of Hebrews, he's talking about how God was trying to bring us back to this oneship, or this rest. This is the rest, or Sabbath rest. Right? That's right here. That can only happen when the disharmony between us and God is removed. That's sin. All right, any thoughts or questions or comments to that?
Well, yeah, that's a perfect statement, because what day did He make holy?
What's that?
So when we rest in Him, what can He do to us?
Right, Sabbath, God says, as in the day, is a sign, it's a sign of thee, right? A sign of dependence upon God. If it turns into a righteousness by works program, oh my. That's what the Jews did to it. They had the technically right ceremonial day, but they have to hurry and get Jesus off the cross to get home in time for sundown. It's a terribly disturbing reality of what happened. But Sabbath, or rest, as in Jesus said, come unto me and I will give you rest. That's what he's talking about. I will bring you back into unity with God. Just keep following me. Keep listening, keep learning, and we watch the disciples, sure enough, they go through it until finally their restoration with God is fixed, or their problem is fixed, and restoration happens, and their whole life changes. And so it should really be simple. But we've looked at it so long from Gentile thinking, trying to understand it, that it ends up too often very complicated. Any thoughts? Remember any verse or two about that?
Yeah,
Know him?
Yeah,
Toss one or two at us.
well, that's not using the word know, but everybody knows this verse. Here's the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments, and I like the King James Version because it says, and have the faith of Jesus.
Good.
Well, all the other versions say in Jesus.
Okay?
So it almost puts on that other way, but if it's of Jesus, Jesus had that relationship with God to the point where he was going to the cross because he still knew his Father is going to bring him out of this.
Right.
So he had that relationship, or knew God, and that's what the faith of Jesus is about, is having that same type of relationship with God.
What does it mean when we say a phrase like the keeper of the flame, or keeper of the bees, or the keeper? What's a keeper? Keeper of the flame. What is that?
Beholder?
A beholder. Yeah. Maintains and tends. Okay.
Protector.
Protector of. All right, so here's the thing. The disciples were not called to be commandment keepers in this way, that they would work hard to read all the law and then seek to do it and conquer it and accomplish. Okay, that would be what Paul says to the Galatians about trying to finish with the flesh what started with the Spirit. It was even less, well, let me say it a different way. The secondary job of the commandment keeper was to actually have it written on their hearts and be like it. There was one that comes before, though. It was the tender. The one who sees it. Might not be like it yet, but sees it, and is unwilling to define it in any other way. They become the protectors of the knowledge of it. Yes, they do become like it, because by beholding you become changed, but we so often are so kind of panicked about that one that, wait a minute, what about just beholding it? And then as we learn it, help others, oh no, that's not right, look again. Right? Like disciples weren't like Jesus yet, but they were bringing people to Jesus. Helping them come. Well, sometimes hindering them. They didn't always get it right. But the point is they started to learn how to become keepers of the truth. Keepers of the commandments. Keepers. It must first be that before it can ever become actually completely doing and being doers of the commandments. But that should not be left out. That is the goal. So anyway, and then the other part of your point, Frank, was faith of, right, which means exactly as you said. They now know God the way Jesus did. They understand and have a trust in God the way Jesus had it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the power in their life will be the same that Jesus had.
Exactly.
Because they live not by might nor by power, but by,
Faith.
as Zechariah said about the oil and the olive trees, but by Spirit, power of God. So that's a good verse for that. Got another one?
I didn't bring mine.
That's all right. We'll wait to hear the whole sermon.
It's still being worked on.
Okay, any direct questions or thoughts about any of this, actually? Because now you can see that we've actually been talking about the same thing all along. We've not changed subjects. We've not changed explanations. We were just testing and retesting from different angles to find out, does this truth really stand up by looking at it from several different angles? And again, back to the very beginning question. Is God love? Is He forgiving? Is He able to heal, to save, to rescue? And does He have wrath?
Yes.
But not like ours. Right? His wrath is totally different. It's after He's tried all of this to bring us here. Like Judas spent a lot of time right here with Jesus. And then finally when it came to the end and he just got a peek, he said, no, if that's what this is about, I don't want it. I don't want that change. That change doesn't allow me to be inward focused and selfish and conquering and making money. I don't mean just making money, I mean having lots of it, right? That was what Judas was after. Even when the woman was washing Jesus' feet, Judas, all he could think about was, well, how much money we could have got out of that, right? When he said that comment about the woman and her gift of ointment on Jesus' feet. Anything else? Any other thoughts? Got any questions for us, Rob?
Just gonna meditate on it for a while.
That's okay. That's okay. All right, Dale. Is it Dale? Brad. How'd I get to Dale? Brad, how about Brad? Any thoughts or question or challenge for us to think on for a few minutes?
Just absorbing it.
Take your time to absorb. That's good, do it. Again, as I said the other nights, don't just go away thinking that this, has to be accepted because I put it on the table.
Guide in the word.
That's right.
This is my statement.
Go ahead.
The way originally Gentiles' way is the way I've been thinking about it. That's how
It is what is
Yeah.
most commonly taught in Christianity, actually. This is not a small subject, nor is it a small treasure to uncover by the same token. It isn't something that we want to just make up so that we have some fun new idea. But like in the time of Jesus, they were talking an awful lot about Messiah, Messiah, Messiah. But when they came, they looked at him and they called him Satan because it didn't fit what they thought. And the devil knows, like on our two altars thing, that if he can take the whole thing that Jesus did as the Lamb of God to reconcile us back and pervert it to a wrong concept,
Make it into an abomination.
if he could achieve that, and we would accept it, Christ is the foundation stone or the cornerstone. And if that thing gets perverted, oh my, your whole building is going to be thrown out of whack. And so that's why it's worth all the time you can spare to recheck, re-question, re-dig. Again, I would not be offended one bit if you said, well, who are you? Tell us what this is. Fine, good, don't listen to me. Check what it says, check see what God says. That's what's imperative to our salvation. Not just agreeing with it because one or two people think it's right. So it's good to meditate on it, to reread. We're still doing that. Actually, I did want to share this for those of you who have come to see this the first time. Normally on Wednesday nights is when we meet. And Wednesday night's activity is about exactly that. Let's reread and see if we can find anything that either substantiates or challenges, questions, maybe finds problems in it so we can get it correct. So it's not a teaching, what are we going to call this, like seminar? We kind of go in a round table or a square table. We open the Word.
Come let us reason
That's
together.
right, with God. Talk together, bring your ideas, bring your thoughts. You're all invited to that, okay? Just want to tell you what that was about. In February, the 18th, is that the first night?
24.
24th is the first time, it'll be the third week in February.
Yeah, it's the 16th actually.
16th, okay. 16th would be a Wednesday night, and the following Thursday night, we're going to repeat this process again. And the more questions and challenges that you bring, the more it helps us to dig and study, so we appreciate that and invite that. But we'll do it again on that date. And then Wednesday nights, on a regular basis, we're here working again on the same subject, same questions.
Bobby, do you still have a little bit of time?
Yeah,
Do you want to go over the vision of the high priest about Joshua and the
Sure.
three garments, etc.? Because
Sure.
it seemed like there were a lot of lessons there before that.
you want to share anything particular about it?
Where is
I'll
it?
read it.
Okay.
Where
Yeah,
is
tell
it?
us where you're going to start reading.
It's Zechariah 3.
Zechariah 3.
Oh, it's harder to find that.
It's a-
Minor
It's
prophets.
a small book.
Then he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to oppose him. And the Lord said to Satan, The Lord rebuke you, Satan. The Lord who has chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. Is this not a brand plucked from the fire? Now Joshua was clothed with filthy garments and was standing before the angel. Then he answered and spoke to those who stood before him, saying, Take away the filthy garments from him. And to him he said, See, I've removed your iniquity from you, and I will clothe you with rich robes. And I said, Let them put a clean turban on his head. So they put a clean turban on his head, and they put the clothes on him, and the angel of the Lord stood by.
Okay. So, the prophet is seeing this in vision, right? The prophet is Zechariah, but at the time when he was prophet, the high priest of Israel, which was part of the group that came back and was rebuilding the temple, or supposed to be rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem and the temple, he was Joshua. That was his name at the time. So let's talk about a literal high priest. But now Zechariah sees him in vision. And how's he clothed? Garments. Filth, rags, right? Filthy rags. And yet he's standing before who?
The Lord.
Angel of the Lord, right? The angel that has come to bring victory. And who else is standing there?
Satan.
Satan. And what's his argument or statement?
He was standing there to accuse him.
Okay, so he's pointing at the filthy rags.
How filthy.
And he's saying, but look at this. And you call this your people? How can you do this, God? See, remember, Lucifer in heaven, when he left heaven, he took a third of the angels with him, right? And so Lucifer had deceived a third, and part of that deception actually became that once they had left, once they had been cast out, they couldn't return. Now, based on everything we've learned about God, would that be true? Not on God's side anyway, because he desires that none should die, but that all should come to repentance and have life. And yet, Satan convinced them or pushed on their minds the fact, yeah, but you've gone too far now. And so you cannot return. That's part of his deception. How do I know that? That's been part of his deception he's fed to humans in every generation that has come. Any story, pick and read it. That's part of what's going on. You brought up Jacob the other night, Joseph and his brothers, and how they were panicking about maybe they did too much, and wow, God was going to really have it in for them now, right? I mean, it's in every story. And so what we see happening here is Satan saying, you cannot take them in when they're clothed in filth like that, and you won't let me in? That's part of Lucifer's argument, Satan's argument. But why was it that Satan, then and now, would be excluded from heaven?
His choice.
Can't be anything else, right? If God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, then Satan's exclusion from heaven is because he is unwilling to surrender his heart to have the law written there. He wants his way or no way, right? And he will never turn from that. But we need to be clear. It's not because God won't let him. It's not because God, suddenly changed the rules. And it doesn't really have to do with choice anymore. It has to do with God cannot talk Lucifer into coming back. Never, never, never. Okay, so imagine in that situation, but he's pointing at this guy clothed in filthy garments. And what is Joshua? Is he representative of people that are like Lucifer, that know and understand and have clarity and recognize God and have fully rejected him? If that were true, they wouldn't even be standing there. Because they're standing there, Joshua is standing there with his trust in God, right? The angel of the Lord who's in front of him. And then the angel tells Lucifer, now be quiet. Okay, you keep talking like that. You keep saying that. You've been saying that for a while, but watch what I'm about to do. And then he gives the command to clean him up, remove the filthy garments, and then clothe him with, and then actually Zechariah even chimes in and says, yeah, put a turban on his head. Right? That was Zechariah who said that. Not the angel. But so that means Zechariah joined in with it and said, yes, we agree. Take it further, right? Clothe him with white raiment and then turban on his head. That all is symbolic, a representative of, again, what God wants to do to us. Our only safe place to be is admitting to the fact that we have no righteousness to commend ourselves to God, but to wait upon the angel of the Lord, of Christ, right, to fix the problem. Call upon him to open up our hearts to his Spirit, who will come in and can transform, will transform, right? So right there you see this concept where Joshua didn't come up and start listing off all his reasons why he should be admitted, or why he should be allowed to stand in the presence of the Lord. He just was quiet.
And he didn't do the changing.
Yeah, he didn't do the changing.
They changed him.
He didn't preach a sermon. He just waited upon the Lord, and the Lord went to work. And so you also see in that this controversy between Satan and Christ, or Satan and God, where this has all been about, questions of who can get in and who can't get in, and what are the rules, and how come that's fair, and how come that's not fair, right? So you see the same thing actually in Jude, verse 9, is it? Where it talks about them discussing about the body of Moses. And once again now, it says the Lord just rebuked him. Rebuke, we don't even know what that word means. It simply means to not agree and to stand against. It doesn't mean to tell them off or to rail on them, because in this one in Jude, is it verse 9? In this one it even talks about how he dared not bring an accusation against who? Who wouldn't bring an accusation against who?
Wasn't supposed to bring an accusation against Moses?
No.
No.
Go ahead, read the verse.
But even the archangel Michael, when he was disputing with the devil about the body of Moses, did not dare to bring a slanderous accusation against him.
Okay, who's the him? That one's unclear, actually.
Well, he was disputing with the devil, so
Yeah.
it's almost like he didn't dare bring a slanderous accusation against the devil.
There it is. Can you read that one from Amplified? Anybody else got a different version? Say something different than that? Didn't bring an accusation against who? I mean,
in the New Living it says, but even Michael, one of the mightiest of the angels, did not dare accuse Satan of blasphemy.
good. Okay, so it's pointing out to who. What does it say in Amplified?
Which verse is it?
9?
Actually,
I was on the wrong page. But when even the archangel Michael, contending with the devil, judiciously argued or disputed about the body of Moses, he dared not presume to bring an abusive condemnation against him, but simply said, "The Lord rebuke you."
So it is talking about his conversation towards the devil. The reason I wanted you to catch that in this version of the story is that it says the angel, in this case Michael, wouldn't even bring an accusation against the devil. I mean, if there was any case to be made, it should have been that you could just rail on, well, yeah, but look at you. Right? He's over there arguing about Moses, and Michael could have said, yeah, but look at you. Look how messed up you are. What are you talking about? But he wouldn't even do that. He just rebuked him, which means to say he did not agree, told him to be silent and watch. And then what does God do? Took Moses away. So Zachary, any other thoughts, Doc, out of the ideas in Zechariah that you wanted us to touch on?
No, I just wanted to review it because I've always been impressed with that section.
Yeah.
so Jim, what about what you brought up yesterday with the punishment? Do we have time to talk about that? a little?
Sure. Remember where we were on that one? There's a couple ideas, a couple of words that we were into. One was punishment. One was,
Wrath, what are you talking about?
yeah, it was kind of about the wrath concept, but it was judgments, I think it was. Fierce judgments, indignation maybe, judgments. You want to read us a couple of sentences? Or more?
Yeah, let's see. It's in the chapter, The Time of Trouble. God's judgments will be visited upon those who are seeking to oppress and destroy his people. His long forbearance with the wicked emboldens men in transgression, but their punishment is nonetheless certain and terrible because it is long delayed. And then Isaiah 28:21 is quoted. The Lord shall rise up as in Mount Perzim. He shall be wroth as in the valley of Gibbon, that he may do his work, his strange work, and bring to pass his act, his strange act. To our merciful God, the act of punishment is a strange act. As I live, saith the Lord God, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked. That's Ezekiel 33:11.
Okay, now that's strung together a bunch of really helpful stuff.
Because she used the description, merciful God, our merciful God.
Okay, it was about merciful. Notice there, last night I talked a little bit about strange and what that was, but right there it sort of pointed at something. What was it that's strange? What did it say again? What was strange?
Strange work.
Which work? Punishment. It was the work of punishment was a strange work. Now, often in our minds we jump to this idea that he's going to torture people forever and ever, and that's the punishment, so that must be the strange work. Of course, that's a bunch of assumptions to line all that up. Rather than, let us go to punishment. Where were some Bible stories you can think of punishment? Someone got punished, but you're absolutely sure God did it out of love. Where's a punishment story that is no question in your mind that that was out of love?
Well, Adam and Eve.
What was the
Be
punishment?
the first one.
What was the punishment?
Well, I don't, just the fact that they sinned.
Okay, so what was the punishment?
Well, the wages of sin is death,
Did they die?
eventually.
Eventually. But he said, the day you eat of this tree, ye shall surely die.
The dying process started.
So did the scripture say, the day you eat of this tree, you'll start dying? Or the day of this tree, you shall die?
Separation
The
from
good is
God.
dead.
Again, like a tree branch broken off from a tree, it's not immediately detectable that it's dead.
But it's dead.
But if you're a farmer and you've worked with this before, you know as soon as this happens, it's dead. Unless
You regraft.
grafting is accomplished, right?
Well, we're considering what the world got to be like before the flood, then that was an act of mercy, because why would anyone want to live forever under those circumstances?
Okay? I was expecting you actually to say that part of the punishment was that they got kicked out of the garden. Right? Something happened, right? They didn't just get to stay and pretend everything was fine. All kinds of things changed. They were out of the garden. The angel with the flaming sword was at the gate. They couldn't just go in whenever they felt like. In fact, they never went in again. Leaves started to fall off trees. We started to see things die. Flowers wilted when you picked them. The written into nature of the law of sin started to be seen. It was mostly seen in that as soon as they separated from him, what happened to them in here?
They were guilty.
Afraid, felt guilt, blame, right? It's his fault, her fault, it's not my fault. All of that stuff started to happen. Those are all like leaves browning. I mean, that quick. So we imagine as they snap the branch off and then you see green leaves for 3 days. Not in the case of Adam and Eve. Disconnected, bam, brown leaves, just like that. Meaning that the spirit and character, they were already dead. This is talking about the living dead. They're still physically alive, but this is dead. That's what God meant. It happened immediately. The moment they ate the tree, it happened. They didn't know what it was yet. And I'm getting off track because we're going to work on punishment. So we see God, and if He had just given them the full results of their choice, what would have happened? They'd have completely died, all the way, not exist anymore. But instead of that, punishment. Okay. So we keep that from happening. Instead, we keep them alive, and we start teaching them and training them and showing them.
Right.
Well, that's a strange
And the
punishment,
first curse he gave them, as a matter of fact, he wrote it, he said it, was the curse of the thorns.
right?
And he took that curse on the cross,
Right.
the crown of thorns, as a symbol of saying, I'm taking your curse.
Let's go to another story though. Punishment. Where's somewhere else you see some punishment happen?
Flood.
But you're sure, the flood? Okay, are you sure that one was out of love?
I believe God's characters that way, so it must be, I have to go backwards.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, you can come to that conclusion, but where's one that starts with clarity? That was loving what he just did in punishment.
How about the snakes?
Okay, so they're grumbling and griping against God again. After they had done this many times and repented many times, and they had seen results before. But now suddenly, God withdraws his protection, and snakes come up out of the sand, or from rocks, wherever they were, hundreds of them, and bite them, and now they're sick, dying. And here's part of the punishment. You're going to get bit, and now I'm going to put up this pole, and if you just look. Strange punishment? Isn't it strange how we have a hard time figuring out how punishment and love even go together? Where's a story like that? How about Peter? I mean, Jesus could have just worked on him for days. Peter, look, you got to get ready for this. You got to get on your knees. You got to, you cannot be going around denying me. You're not going to be allowed to be a disciple if you're going to do that. But he didn't. He warned Peter, told him lovingly, but he also knew Peter needed to go through it because that's the only way Peter was going to learn. But Judas also was headed down that path. Jesus said more things to warn Judas than he did to warn Peter, if you count up the different comments that Jesus made to each of them. So Jesus worked harder at preventing Judas from going where he went, sort of, than Peter. And what is Peter's, I flipped that around. More on Judas, than on Peter. So what was Judas's punishment? Was it that he wasn't allowed back in as a disciple?
Experience what he chose.
And what was it that he chose? He chose it even physically, right?
Yeah.
He said, I will not continue this. I will kill myself. He went out and hung himself, it says. So where, if you look all through Jesus' life and you try to figure out where was he punishing the people, can you find it? It's in there. He stepped up suddenly one afternoon just before his crucifixion. He stood between the people who were receiving what he had to say, who were babes in the truth, who were simple, poor in spirit, brokenhearted, those that had mourned, all that group, right, from the Beatitudes. And he stood between them and the ones who were blocking the way. And he said, "Woe to you, Pharisees, you snakes, you scribes. Woe unto you." And he goes down his whole list, warning them of what they were, and warning them not to follow them, as he had said earlier. Leave them. They're blind guys. If a blind man follows a blind man, both will fall into a pit, right? Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, Jesus had said previously. But suddenly he stood up to do this strange act, the punishment now of what's going to occur, of having to unveil what this really is. He still did it without talking about a particular individual and spoke in general. Then, here's part of the punishment. He lets them go their own way. You would have a king, okay? You'll have the king that you choose. What king have you chosen? And the devil possesses them, and they take Jesus out, and they want to rip him to pieces and whip him and spit on him and put him on a cross. And as they watch, that punishment is in full swing. God is letting go of them. How are they going to be able to stand? Jesus once said, "Who is going to rescue your soul from hell?" That's what he said to the Pharisees, right? If you won't listen, how are you going to get in to the kingdom? And so he's letting go. We know earlier, before he did this woes to the Pharisees activity, he rode in the donkey. He wept over Jerusalem, knowing that they were going to reject him. But he had to let go. He had to let them go their own way. And what's going to happen to them if they go their own way? What is the sure results? Death and destruction. And so Jesus, now after they crucify him, he's not satisfied that he warned them and told them enough times about the punishment that is coming, that's only partly done. So he sends the disciples back and tells them, tell them again, warn them again, tell them to come back, tell them that I'm the Savior who still loves them. Come home now. Stop and where you're going, repent and turn back. Do they listen? Many do, but most do not. Most still forcefully push them away, rejecting, until even their children after them reject. 40 years now after the crucifixion, and the whole city and temple is destroyed. But Flavius Josephus points out how but none of the Christians died. None of the believers in Jesus died in that siege. because at night there was a door that was opened up, and they were a way of escape, and they got out just a night or two before the whole destruction. And so, was that God sending Titus's army in and then getting them all worked up full of hatred against the temple and against the Jews, go in there and beat on them and throw every stone this way and that way and burn the place down? How could that be God? That is not the Spirit of God. In Him there is no darkness at all. In Him there is no evil. It can't be God. But God, loving them enough to say, I have to give them their choice, and He backs up and backs off, and His protection is removed, and they start killing one another in the temple and eating their own children for food. I said that last night, huh? Killing on the steps of the temple, in the city. I mean, that's a horrific event, a horrific story. One of the verses that connects to that is this idea of, can a mother forget her suckling, her child that she nursed? And the answer comes, yes, she can. She will kill her child and eat her for food. Eat him for food. If the Spirit of God is not in them, that is all that they can become. And at that point, what is left for them? What can be done for them? And this is why, even though I'm talking about this, and you can, it's okay if you say, well, he's making all that stuff up. Maybe it's not true. But when we get to that third coming, when we do get there, this question will be answered for all the universe. This question will be the focus of that event, that third coming, when the wicked and the righteous are there, and the whole story is told again. Fire comes down from heaven. And once again we'll find out, are they there because God has arbitrarily locked them out? Or are they there because God can't talk them into changing their mind? Then we will see, all that description you just read, Jim, this is His strange act. He does not want to let go. He longs to save, but they will not let Him. So in His love, the strange part is He must, and we use terms like visit judgments upon them. Now, having said all that, that's the end. Okay? We do not need to come up with a theory or bend and twist a theory into the fact that every event in the Bible, God had no active part. What I mean is, in Egypt, when the angel came and the firstborn lives were taken, who was that did that? Yeah, it says the angel of the Lord. We don't need to bend it into something else. But I can guarantee you that angel was not frustrated. That angel was not hating those people. That angel was not there to say, let me see how much pain I can cause. It was a shadow form, a shadow death, a shadow punishment of the real. There are shadows. Let us not take the shadows and use them to try to understand the real event. Let us understand the real event through looking through the eyes of Jesus, and then go back and look at the shadow events and realize that even Sodom and Gomorrah, even Egypt, even the flood, these judgments that fell, these punishments, really are all about God doing what's needed to rescue as many as possible out of every situation. And no one is arbitrarily cut off or left behind or destroyed out of ignorance. That will not happen. So it is true, Jim, we have those terms and those phrases, and instantly our mind goes into our training, our background, our idea of what's in us painted on God. But doesn't the Scripture say God's God talking, and He says, my ways are higher than your ways. Who can know them? Who can reach up into heaven and grasp them, He says. But the amazing part is He then chose to reveal His ways in all of its fullness through who? Jesus. Through Jesus. So we must go back and really study those stories of Jesus and ask the question, okay, where was He doing that punishment? Where was He doing that judgments? Where was He? Because if you can't find it in Jesus' activity during His life on the earth, then our understanding, I would say, is still incorrect about God. Because we have pictures of God that Jesus did not paint. And Jesus is the answer for everything that we could not see upon that mountain when we fell down in fear with all of our ideas, when it shook and it quaked and smoked and all that. Let us go back and ask the question again. If you've seen Jesus, you've seen the Father, how is that? It's okay to ask all those questions. It's okay to say, God, could you show me through Christ what your anger looks like? Can you show me what judgment is, or how it works and what happens? Can you show me this activity of punishment? Show me how Jesus did that. And the trick there is, right, Satan wants us to buy concepts that don't match Jesus. And here's a verse, another verse from the New Testament that says, they who deny the Father and the Son, they are of Antichrist, meaning it's following the teachings of Antichrist. And not to get all panicked about that, except to say this. The point of that verse is Paul is saying, was it Peter? Saying that, look, this thing here, this connection between the Father and the Son, their relationship, that thing where Jesus said, "If you see me, and you see the Father," that's what this is about. All those who define God differently than Jesus showed him to be, we need to be cautious to go down that path and go back and ask the Lord for wisdom and once again see it. So, again, if you want to tomorrow to read that more fully, that's fine. We're gonna keep coming back to that same idea, though, is we've got to stop painting our idea of God's strange act and then look at Jesus. Jesus, when he laid down his life, when he went to the cross, let's go to this. This is probably the last most important piece to that conversation for the night. What caused Jesus' death?
Separation
Was it
from God.
crucifixion?
Separation from God.
Yeah, because see, the other two guys, they were still alive. I mean, sometimes people would hang for days and not die. Jesus was there 6 hours or less, okay? And even the Romans did not understand how he could be dead, because he wasn't hanging there that long. So, the pierced with the sword, the water and blood flowing, representing or showing died of a broken heart. This is connected to the fact that what really happened was he was separated from God. God let go, and let's say it this way, he poured out on Jesus all of the vindictive judgments that he had. Or, what's another word for those judgments? All of those, how did it say it? Punishments. I'm trying to think of those words I was using there.
God's vengeance.
Vengeance, he poured it all out. And of course, we could quickly run down the path. Wow, yeah, see, that's true. And so God was really mad because Jesus finally became sin, so he really took it out on his son. But that's not what happened. Angels, had they watched that, suddenly would have said, wait a minute, Lucifer might have been right about God. But indeed what they saw is a God who loved his son all the way through. And even now, as Jesus crying, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? The answer comes echoing back from heaven as if to say, because they needed to know what separation would do to them. Right? I had to let go of you, John 3:16. For God so loved the world, he gave up. Let go. Same Greek word as in Romans when it comes to the wicked being let go of. Same exact word. And so here, this whole concept about letting go and being separated. Jesus, if you want to say punishments, wrath, vengeance, you wrap them all together and say, now God poured that all out on Jesus. And what did Jesus go through? Separation from his Father. Did he want to go through that? Certainly not. That's why in the garden he was struggling so hard with that. He had nothing in him that wanted to be separated from the Father. But he was willing to go through it. Why?
Right.
So you and I could see it. So we could understand what sin will do to us if we won't let God rescue us. That's exactly what we're doing. So that, I think, for me, Jim, is the biggest piece to put in there. And then keep rereading, keep checking, keep looking at him again, and coming back to, but Jesus showed us what it looked like to have all that poured out on him. And so what is it? What was poured out on him? What did he go through? What happened? And that's probably our clearest explanation. And then to say that Jesus during his life showed us the attitude, the heart, the character of God in its fullness, according to Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1 through 3. Fun stuff to keep working on and digging into. But again, by no means take it that you have to just buy it because I said it. We've got to study it and read it again and again.
We really needed the incarnation.
Absolutely.
It just absolutely had to.
Right. Because God, behind the smoke and fire and in the earthquake, we still couldn't see and grasp him like we really needed to.
Right. Without Christ, we wouldn't.
That's right.
We never understand God.
Even Abraham, who got to see it, saw it through the understanding of this right here. Now granted, he didn't have all those details yet. He had last night's version, right? Abel's altar. But he was able to look in there and he could see that that was about love. That was about a God of love giving his son to rescue him. That he got. And that's all that was needed. He didn't have any idea. By the time he was there holding his hand over his son, his own son Isaac, he didn't have any idea that God somehow needed this death. Because he certainly didn't need this death. God did not need this death. We didn't do it, and we don't probably have time tonight, but there is a verse that we should work on, and we could do it another night, anytime someone wants to bring it up. And that's Hebrews 9:22, which in most translations says, without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness. And that one verse, there are like 3 verses in the Bible that are real strong, if you want to say, foundation pieces for what I call the wrong altar. This is one of them. But I will just quickly tell you, it's because of a mistranslation. And so we got to go back and look at it closely to figure out what that verse is really talking about. Does it say, unless there's blood, God won't forgive? In some versions, that's what it says. Could it really be true that God wouldn't forgive and love if there wasn't some death to pay him off? We've been saying that a lot. So that one's a fun one to go through, to look into the Greek. We don't have to do that a lot that I've found, but that one's worth doing, taking a little look at it and figuring out what that word really is in there, what it's really saying. And it kind of goes with that propitiation idea. And so that one's right in Hebrews, the book that actually is teaching this thing right here that I drew on the board tonight. And then some translations throw that one a little bit funny. So if someone take note of that. If you want to work on that later at another time, we'd be happy to do that. That's a good verse to check out.
Hebrews what?
Hebrews 9:22.
It seems like God's strange act, he accomplishes his strange act in different ways.
True.
And sometimes he just withdraws and he lets,
Like
he's
the
an army
snakes.
like Nebuchadnezzar
Babylon.
comes into Babylon
Yep.
and just really pounds on God's people.
The usefulness of that story that you just brought up is actually, it explains it that way, right? He says, I will withdraw, I will remove my protection, and Nebuchadnezzar is going to come in and do this thing. Yeah. So that
Yeah.
one, he explains it that way.
And then, like what I was been reading here, when God parted the Red Sea, well, it says that angels went down and flipped the wheels off of the
Right,
chariots.
help prevent
I mean,
which you can't get out of a Bible verse, but
those were angels of God. Went down there and they just kind of got balled up down there, and then they decided that God was, working for the Israelites, and they thought, well, we better turn around and head back to shore, the other side. Well, it was too late.
and that's why we'd be real in trouble if we were trying to reinterpret all the scriptures that say the angel of the Lord did this thing or God did this thing. You don't need to turn them into something else. It should say what it says. But isn't it true of us, even as human parents, sometimes with the discipline and punishment of our own children, who we love, sometimes we step back and we let them reap the consequences of what they're about to do or doing. We don't usually start with that. You don't let the baby go up and put the hand on the hot fireplace, right? Nobody does that. Shouldn't do that. But there are times when we use punishment that is, we are actually inflicting something, not to kill, but to what?
Instruct.
Train, to instruct. And then sometimes we step back and we allow the results to happen, not a truck hitting our child, but something that is safe, something that they can learn from, and we step back and we allow that to happen. That's true even of us. So why would that be so complicated to see that of God? The thing we got to understand, though, is those are trainings. The reason I said the thing about the truck is you don't do that when the truck's coming down the road and the child's standing in the middle of the road and you say, well, let him see what happens. We don't say that. So we got to take the training as the early part. That's what we do. That are what I like to refer to as the shadow experiences, getting to the final. And what's the final again? The final is, are you sure you won't put your trust in God and live? Are you sure you're going to reject? And that's the truck, right? This is not going to be done because just God decided, well, you need to just try it and see what happens. This is going to be after everything else has been trained and tested and safe versions of it tried again. And finally, everything's been done. It can be done. We're back to our cliff stories where we're at, right, Jim? We're back to what do you do to help that child not jump off that cliff? But the day may come when love will no longer, or it won't step over the line, is what I should say, and go into force. It's not gonna, at 30 years of age, say, I'm sorry, I'm not allowing you to do that. It cannot do that. And so God, in the same way, has worked with us in all these different and various manners. Yes, shadows. Yes, examples of Him withdrawing. Yes, examples of inflicting. The Psalm says He wounds us. Why? So He can heal us, right? So that's like talking about shepherds and lambs and how sometimes they inflict a wound on the leg so that they can set it and heal it and talk that lamb into just wandering off and getting eaten up by the lion. But all that shadow stuff, where this is really going, where we really got to be clear on, is when it gets down to the end. This is the God who changes not. He's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. He'll be the same God that sat on the donkey and looked over Jerusalem and wept. That's coming again. And He will want to save all, but crazy enough, thousands and thousands, whatever numbers it's going to be, are going to say, no, if I have to submit to you and change and become servant-like and full of love and compassion and no more selfishness, I don't want it. Too many will say that. Too many will clamor to keep their sinful nature and say they don't want to be transformed.
I was just going to go off what you said. It reminded me of another verse.
Okay.
You're saying about your children. And even Jesus says, when your son or your child asks for a loaf of bread, you give him a snake,
Right.
you know, and so forth. And he goes, you who are basically evil
Know how to give good
know how to give good things. And here's your father, you know. That to me, that's a great example.
So in clarity, there is a theory out there that wants to try to make it so God has had no active role in bringing any training punishment to His children. That wouldn't be true. Too many verses that make that very clear that He did that. But the real question is down at the end. And those judgments and punishments you're reading about there. Is that because God is now going to heap up extra on them to really let them have it, like my Bible teacher once said, in that day, meaning the last judgment day? It'll be a great day when we can finally see those people get what they deserve. Is that what that's going to be about?
If we're going to get what we deserve, we'd be with him.
Not if God is just like Jesus. Yeah, you're right. That attitude will exclude us from the heavenly kingdom. And so that's why in the New Testament, you see the whole tenor, the whole sort of attitude of everything. No longer is it a question about, which nations we're going to conquer. That whole stuff is out, gone. Not because God changed the rules, but we're done with shadows. We're done with the ceremonial law. We're done with everything in shadow form that was trying to teach us the truth. We now have the real thing, Christ Himself. And we are to be in conformity to Christ, not in conformity to Israelites who were slaughtering somebody or anybody else like Goliath. That's just not part of it. So we see that change happen. That's because this progression of going from children with training activities, we're now moving up here to another space, another place where it has to do with really coming to know God through Jesus and letting His Spirit take over and becoming like Him. And then we turn the other cheek. Then we don't gripe and complain and fight for our rights. We humbly submit ourselves and exemplify or portray or show, teach what God is really like. Because that's what it's about. It's not about how long do we get to live here in our castle. All right, we're going to close because I went past the time. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your love and your grace. And again, we just ask for the blessing from your Spirit, because who of us can really comprehend and know unless you enlighten our minds and hearts? And we want to be humble learners, humble people who want to just know you better and not make ourselves some standard or some explanation of what is true and not true. But awaken our minds and our thoughts as we continue to read the Scriptures. Help us to have that experience like the men on the road to Emmaus, to be able to see what was there all along, but for so long somehow we didn't see it, so that our clarity might grow. The world is just hurting with so many people hungry for and thirsty for a knowledge of a living God, a God that is in the middle of touching their lives and changing their lives. And yet so often we're just spouting theories and talking and arguing between different viewpoints and not really having the Spirit. So we need that. We need to be done with this plain religion thing and be filled with your love and your grace. And we thank you that you're the God that did that for the apostles and that you can do it for us. And we put our trust in you to do it. In Jesus' name, amen.